Knowledge sharing as formative assessment, how culturally responsive teaching aligns with Steiner philosophy. In this presentation, I'll be discussing different types of knowledge sharing, how these can be practiced as formative assessments that amplify culturally responsive teaching and align with Steiner education and philosophy. Engaging with culturally responsive teaching practices is significant in establishing inclusive learning environment. An inclusive learning environment affords students with a range of methods to connect to knowledge. Assessing this knowledge with the use of formative practices employs several of Steiner's philosophies. One of the major differences between a Steiner-informed educational practice and the Australian standard is the approach to assessment. The Australian Steiner curriculum framework employs observational assessment, which would fall under the category of formative assessment. Formative assessment has become increasingly popular amongst researchers interested in education. It is now an evidence-based approach to assessment. The Australian Education Research Organisation conducted a review of 138 studies and found formative assessment to be an effective teaching practice that is likely to work in most contexts. Formative assessment is process-based. It is a dynamic approach to evaluating students' capacities and needs. It includes gathering and interpreting information about student learning as it unfolds in the classroom. Summative assessment, on the other hand, seeks to evaluate student knowledge with evidence acquired through testing. Its purpose is to determine where a student sits in relation to a set standard. For example, the NAPLAN test, Australia's national summative assessment. Within Steiner education, teachers employ formative assessment. Teachers observe students and evaluate their learning through qualitative judgment. Feedback is provided based on their growth and individual development. This form of assessment is in line with several of Steiner's educational principles. Our educational principles and methods must not be tied up in fixed formulae. Steiner, 1921. Within this quote, and throughout Steiner's lectures on education, he emphasizes the artistic nature of education and how it is to be enacted as a living and dynamic process. A child-centered curriculum, in line with formative assessment, is another guiding principle of Steiner education. We should not learn to teach out of any other book than the one line open before us and consisting of the children themselves. Steiner, 1924, quoted from his lectures titled Human Values in Education. According to Steiner Education Australia, schools following the Australian Steiner curriculum framework will assess their students through non-invasive and non-competitive means in order to promote Steiner's philosophy of social harmony and cooperation. A trend in education which amplifies these qualities is culturally responsive teaching. Culturally responsive pedagogy is an approach to teaching and learning that uses the cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conduits for teaching them more effectively. I was introduced to this through a podcast by Tom Scheimer and Natalie Bartabasso, the authors of Rehumanizing Assessment, where they discuss the benefits of storytelling for assessment purposes. In this podcast, Scheimer recalls a conversation with Zaretta Hammond, the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, 2014. They discuss the importance of engaging multiple cultural knowledge traditions, such as oral, written, individual, and collective. Scheimer explains that it doesn't have to be even, but there has to be an authentic representation of all four. Zaretta Hammond defines culturally responsive teaching as an educator's ability to recognize students' cultural displays of learning and meaning-making and respond positively and constructively. The educator's role is to harness cultural knowledge and learning systems to promote effective information processing. Assessment determines our attention. The skills and knowledge we assess of our students are perceived to be the most important. Culture can be defined as shared systems of meaning-making. It is what shows up as most important within a collective. Assessment is a strong determinant of educational culture. Cultural responsive teaching aims to create an educational culture that is diverse and inclusive. Therefore, various methods of assessment should be employed. In order to be inclusive of diverse cultures, it is important to appreciate the different communication styles. The 4 styles of knowledge sharing I will be looking at are written, oral, individual, and collective. The medium of communication is not merely a passive conduit for the transmission of information, but rather an active force in creating new social patterns and new perceptual realities. Logan, 1986. Written text is one of the dominant forms of knowledge transfer within Western culture. It is employed to hold knowledge and to be produced as evidence of knowledge. Writing is a complex neurophysiological process that integrates motor, cognitive, and emotional mechanisms. It can be beneficial for processing emotions, activating the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. According to Steiner's stages of development, formal reading and writing typically begin around the age of 7. Oral communication has been our most dominant form of knowledge sharing in human history. Indigenous cultures highly value this method. It is considered critical to the health and future of communities. Oral communication engages a process of neural synchronization, which results in positive learning outcomes. Steiner education uses oral storytelling, singing, and rhyme throughout all the stages of child development. Individual knowledge sharing is when information is being shared by a single person. It is a characteristic identified with Western educational systems. It is linked to both summative and formative assessment. In Steiner's stages of development, children become more aware of their individuality around the ages of 9 and 10. This is sometimes referred to as the 9.5 change. Collective knowledge sharing is rooted in collaboration. It encourages various styles of communication and increases social interaction. Collective ways of knowing and thinking are more aligned with Indigenous cultures. Collective assessment can be a bridge to engage reluctant learners and generate new ideas. Collectivism can also be considered in regards to peer assessment or incorporating the voices of community, including parents. Employing these different types of knowledge sharing leverages the brain's memory systems and information processing structures. Alongside the positive learning outcomes, expressing and assessing knowledge in these varying ways is inclusive of diverse cultures. In this way, culturally responsive teaching does not need to mention race or specifically reference culture. Rather, it is culturally responsive by including culturally diverse learning methods. To incorporate these knowledge-sharing styles into formative assessment, a teacher may ask their students to produce multifaceted projects, such as a story. Our brains are wired to remember stories. We use them to make sense of the world. Assessing students' learning through story can improve creativity, critical thinking, and meaning-making. According to Robert St. Clair, Western educators view the acquisition of knowledge as the goal of education, whereas many Indigenous cultures view meaning as most important. Assessing students on a story project offers the teacher the opportunity to gauge the student's capacity to formulate ideas collectively, their ability to record the story through writing, their oral portrayal, and their individual connection to the outcome. Employing these methods of knowledge sharing and authentically engaging them through assessment aligns with Steiner education's emphasis on being holistic. Incorporating these culturally responsive teaching techniques is future-focused. It encourages collaboration, critical thinking, problem-solving, and creativity. Assessing with inclusivity and respect for diverse cultures ensures that we can meet the child where they are and facilitate an expansive learning environment.